All right, Deuteronomy 5, let's call this one Pangono Pangono and subtitle it Fully Lit. First of all, Pangono Pangono begs a translation, especially through my mispronunciation in Chichewa of little by little, which is what Pangono Pangono means. It is a term often used in Malawi when people are describing little by little how we will progress or do a certain thing or how things will be apportioned out so that we have a bite-sized portion of what we need, not too much to process at any one time. And that is exactly what is going on here in two capacities as we get Moses detailing the history of how he originally gave them the 10 Commandments. And in doing that, much like we've seen in previous chapters, he's not just going to talk about the actual law, he is going to talk about our attitude or our approach to the law, beginning in about verse 1, where he's going to say, "And Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, 'Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them.'" Understanding that previously we talked about the importance of not just being a hearer of the word, but being a doer. But he's adding to that, Pangono Pangono, this principle of learning, which involves more than simply hearing and doing. It is the effort that it takes to actually master the principles. And based upon this principle, in the next chapter, he's going to say, especially as heads of households, we're going to need to learn these principles enough to equip others, especially those in our family, to be able to become fluent in these principles as well so that they can effectively put them to work. And so Pangono Pangono, he is building on the attitude that we need to have toward these laws, but he's actually building on these laws bit by bit as well, as we'll see in verse 22. After he restates the 10, he's going to say this: "These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness with a loud voice, and he added no more." That wasn't all that they were going to learn, but at this particular point, that is what he added, understanding that as we went through the Exodus, we saw that he gave them the 10, but then he gave them additional principles in the following chapters. Then he took a break to talk about the construction of the tabernacle before going into Leviticus, which talked about the sacrificial system that was to take place at that tabernacle. And then going forward in the sacrificial system, he added another set of principles, which led into Numbers, where he talked about the part of the law that talked about their roles and responsibilities within the nation. And finally getting into Deuteronomy, he is recounting the history of the law that they have to this point, giving them some final principles that they'll need to understand if they are going to effectively handle the new responsibility that they'll find in the promised land. And so ultimately, he is adding little by little insight into their attitude toward the law and little by little laws that they can take in bite-sized chunks to be able to understand how they will live effectively. But just as important, he's going to say that there's some things that they do not need to add at all, whether little by little or not. And the things that they're not supposed to add are anything. Ultimately, we're going to see that toward the end of the chapter when it says in verse 32, "You shall be careful, therefore, to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall walk in all the way." And it's going to continue on from there. But that points back a chapter to something we didn't mention in chapter 4, which says, "You shall not add to or take away from this law that God is giving." And so what he is counseling them to do is akin to walking into a fully lit room as opposed to a dimly lit room that doesn't allow you to either fully appreciate the environment or, to the degree you desire, to be introspective. If there's a mirror in that room, it doesn't allow you the ability to see yourself clearly. And so he is counseling them to understand the full truth of what God is trying to say so that they can have a fully lit appreciation of the environment around them and themselves, and understand when we give these 5-minute insights, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to give insight into the full truth of what God has told us. And to the degree we make mistakes, we want to correct those so that we can fully appreciate the best he has to offer us, living our lives in the full truth of what he is counseling us to do, which is why we say his best to you as you go forward in him.